Hello, my name is Lisa Fellingham, and in this presentation I'll be going over the CAPS Senior Phase Mathematics document. The CAPS document is a very useful document that will help you plan lessons, design and write up different assessments, and in this presentation I will go through the different content areas of mathematics and the different types of assessments. I will also go over some examples of assessments in the different content areas. Let us start with the content areas. Let's get into the content areas of mathematics. So this is an overview that is given on page 10 of the CAPS document, and this gives a brief description of the general content focus, and then what is expected in this senior phase. I will now go into each of the different content areas and explain and summarize what each area is about and the weighting of the content depending on the grade. So numbers, operations, and relationships. This is a very important section of work. This is about ensuring learners have a good number sense. This means that they understand what the numbers mean and then can practically work with them. This is an important foundation. Being able to work with numbers, understand the properties of operations, these concepts and skills that this section develops is crucial for the following content areas and the following years and even into adulthood. This topic has 5 subtopics: whole numbers, exponents, integers, common fractions, and decimal fractions. And in grade 7, the section has a 30% weighting. Grade 8 is 25%, and grade 9 it is 15%. So when I'm talking about weighting, I'm saying of all the content that they cover in grade 7, 30% is numbers, operations, and relationships. So this weighting is different because these concepts are more basic. So it's important to get the learners to get this right in the earlier grades, in grade 7 and 8. But by grade 9, this becomes more of level 1 questions, which we'll go over later. The second content area is patterns, functions, and algebra. So this is where we are moving the learners up a level from just understanding numbers to understanding variables. We also want to get them to start seeing patterns, which is a part of the nature of mathematics. And we want them to start connecting the different ideas they have come across in mathematics and see them as interrelated concepts. There are 5 subtopics here: numeric and geometric patterns, functions and relationships, algebraic expressions, algebraic equations, and graphs. Numeric and geometric patterns is when learners encounter sequences with diagrams, constant differences, and creating general rules to find terms. Functions and relationships is an introduction to algebra, when learners see input and output values with rules. And algebraic expressions is when the learners will encounter the different rules and conventions of dealing with variables. They'll be taught ways to expand and simplify. And then algebraic equations, not expressions, equations, is when we combine the equal signs and the algebraic expressions. This is a very important shift for learners to understand. And then graphs involve interpreting and drawing graphs on the Cartesian plane. In the senior phase, this is most often linear graphs, and it's important for learners to get used to the standard in how to draw and label graphs, because when we consider that senior phase is preparing them for the FET phase, and even if they take math literacy, they will have to draw and understand graphs. So this is part of preparing them for that. In grade 7, this has a weighting of 25%. Grade 8, it is 30%, and grade 9, a weighting of 35%. So in this topic, the trend goes up. The weighting of this goes up depending on the grade. Space and shape, or geometry, is the third content area given in the CAPS document. There are 4 subtopics: geometry of 2D shapes, geometry of 3D objects, geometry of straight lines, and the transformation geometry. And the weightings are 25% in grade 7 and 8, and 30% in grade 9. The fourth content phase is measurement. It has 3 subtopics: area and perimeter of 2D shapes, surface area and volume of 3D objects, and the theorem of Pythagoras. The weighting is 10% throughout the phase. The last topic is data handling with 4 subtopics: collect, organize, and summarize data, represent data, interpret, analyze, and report data, and then probability. So this is an important topic relating to real-life application and where numbers are realistically used in real life. This will help them understand data that is given to them in the future and how to handle the information. This is also setting a solid foundation for work they'll do in mathematics or mathematical literacy in the FET phase. The weighting is 10% throughout the phase. Moving on to the different types of assessments given in the CAPS document. Assessments are very useful for figuring out what our learners already know, baseline assessments, especially in the senior phase. We need to consider that our learners are coming from many different backgrounds and have varying degrees of knowledge and understanding. Figuring out problem areas, diagnostic assessments. This can be useful for both of us and the learners. By setting a diagnostic assessment, we can show them that they have a problem they may not have realized about yet. Formative assessments are used for learning. This can be used to help teach new topics and have the learners discover the mathematics for themselves. But these can also be used to help us become better teachers. We can discover how our learners are processing the information they are given, and we can adjust our teaching methods to better support our learners. And then summative assessments are assessments of learning. And these are the ones that are generally used at the end of a topic. This is focused on the product of learning. This is generally class tests, cycle tests, exams, and other things like that that progress the learner to the next topic, to the next grade. These are the grades that they get in their markbooks. Just to go into more detail, baseline assessments are very useful in figuring out what each learner understands from the beginning of a topic or section, or even the year. Understand about the different concepts. Okay. I would use baseline assessments at the beginning of each new topic. It would take the form of a short test, maybe 30 minutes, and would involve the topics from the previous year. For example, at the beginning of the year, teaching grade 8's, the CAPS document says the curriculum starts with the content area, numbers, operation, and relationships. So I would set a baseline assessment on the content they did in grade 7. Okay, we're talking about grade 8's, beginning of the year. I'd give them a test based on grade 7 knowledge. Okay, so this would include, if we look at this video of the CAPS document, it would include checking times tables, ordering and comparing whole numbers at a grade 6 or 7 level, properties of whole numbers at a grade 6 or 7 level, calculations using whole numbers at a grade 6 or 7 level, the different calculation techniques that are taught in grade 7, listing prime factors, and finding the LCM and HCF of a number is also incredibly important at the beginning of this year. The questions are meant to be level 1 and 2 questions. So I'll go over this a bit later, but level 1 and level 2 questions are knowledge and routine procedure questions only. This means they should be things that don't require an in-depth problem solving. Okay? By giving learners this test at the beginning of the year in this topic, I'll be able to see common mistakes early, especially if there's a common, maybe grammatical error that students make, especially with equal signs. I find that we get, I call them math grammar mistakes, where they've been taught a way to do things and when the math becomes a bit more complicated, they carry over that way of doing things and they don't understand the concepts. So I'd be able to see that more clearly with a baseline test. But I would also be able to adjust my teaching to help them be better prepared for the work ahead. I also find that it's easier to remember learners' names once you start marking their work. So it also starts the professional relationship in helping each of the learners succeed to their highest ability. I found an article by Adelabu and Alex, written in 2023, that analyzed the difficult concepts in senior phase mathematics. And they found that algebra, number patterns, statistics, shapes, geometry, simplifications, sequences and series, and addition and subtraction of numbers are easy topics to answer, while fractions, mixed fractions, factorization, probability, and measurement were topics that were very difficult. So this guides me in knowing which topics I am more likely to get resistance from the learners and where they might struggle more in. So this is a generalization, but it's always good to know, okay, when we start fractions, this is something that they might struggle with, and have that in our brains when we're teaching can help us become better teachers and more mindful of our learners. And we can try to teach in different ways and have more pathways to get to the same solution so that it can fit more learners who might fit better, different pathways to the answer better than others. Diagnostic assessments are basically tests that we give learners to discover where their knowledge gaps are. To better help the individual learner, we should give diagnostic assessments around 3 times a year. They can also be customized for a specific learner to help get to the heart of their issue. For example, let's say there is a grade 8 learner who got her education before now in a different country with a different curriculum. She can do some algebra, but struggles with fractions. We should therefore give a series of questions to help determine her gaps. I think this is a great tool to help our individual learners succeed to their highest ability. Now, formative assessments. These are informal assessments to help the teacher and learner figure out what they understand at that point. So they can take place at any time during a lesson, are mostly individual, and the main function is to provide feedback. This will help the teacher realize what they may need to focus on more or less, and help the learner realize where they might be missing some information. These are generally not used for promotion purposes. So a few examples of this could be pop quizzes to check for understanding, or maybe exit tickets, where students answer a short question at the end of a lesson. These can be done daily or weekly, at the beginning or end of each section. Personally, I think a daily exit ticket is a great way to end the lesson, especially in these grades. Children like a set routine, and check in with the learner daily is a good way to set a good routine and check in with them every day. This is a flowchart I found on the website called Desert Designed that goes through how we can use the information we gather from our formative assessments to better improve the learning going on in our classrooms. So we're not just giving them pop quizzes for the sake of pop quizzes, giving them exit tickets for the sake of it. This is practically how we can use that information we gather. Okay, so from the top we can check if the whole class understood, and we can go, okay, if they did, yes, then we move on to the next topic, or we give a summative assessment. It means we did great, good job. If not, if the whole class did not understand, then the question is, were most of the kids struggling? Is the majority of the class still stuck? If they are, then an important question would be, is it the first day of working on a new topic? Because if it is, then maybe we should give it another day of practice and reassess tomorrow. But if it's not, and there are still a majority of the classes struggling, then we need to evaluate our lesson delivery practice and activities and the way that we have taught this. And we need to reteach it in a different way the following lesson, because clearly they didn't understand. So we need to reteach it. Okay. If not most of the kids are struggling, only a few are still stuck, then we go into group projects. Okay. Can we create small groups of students based on the current skill level? Okay. Have those that understand with those who don't and join them together. Can we do that in this classroom? Do we even know who knows and who doesn't? If we can split the class up into small groups, then we can use those small groups during the practice time the next day to address the needs of the students, to practice, because peer learning is a great way to learn. Okay? And it is a great way to enrich those who already understand. If you can split them into small groups, then the following lesson, begin the lesson with an entrance ticket. Okay, this will help you develop the small groups so that you can still do that small group task, because that really is a great way to help the whole class understand. Now, summative assessments are the assessments we use for promotion of the learners. These are assessments that test their knowledge and understanding after a topic has been complete. So this is when the cognitive levels come in. When designing assessments, we have to have a good spread of questions. We can't just have the problem-solving questions or only the easiest types of questions. This is why the CAPS document details for us what percentage of question needs to be at a certain level. So 25% of these assessments, of the questions in these assessments, should be knowledge-based. Okay, so knowledge-based means that it is straight recall. This is memorization stuff. Okay, this is using mathematical facts, adding, subtracting, dividing, multiplying, simply. Okay, and it is appropriate use of mathematical vocabulary like denominator, numerator, those kinds of things. Okay, 45% should be routine procedure. Okay, routine procedure is stuff that they have done a lot. These are well known with obvious solutions. They have done these over and over and over again, and they should know how to do it. It requires some thinking and some skill and applying that knowledge, but it's still routine. Okay? Generally speaking, every learner should be able to get all or most of level 1 and level 2 questions correct. Okay? Knowledge and routine procedures should be something that every learner is able to do. Okay. Therefore, 70% of the test is something that they can do. Then, there's 20% of the questions that involve complex procedures. So these are more complex questions that may have more steps or a higher order of reasoning. And 10% of the questions are problem-solving questions. These can also be called unseen questions. And this is a good way to challenge the higher achieving learners to stretch their understanding. So it's a good way to push those who want to get that 100%, and those gifted learners who maybe went above and beyond and maybe think in extraordinary ways. This is page 1 of my reference list. This is page 2 of my reference list. Thank you for listening to my presentation on the CAPS document for the Senior Phase Mathematics.